Today we're talking about gout, and if you've got gout then you certainly know about it. Now most commonly gout is known as an arthritis type condition, so it affects your joints. Typically gout affects the big toe. Don't know why, but it typically affects the big toe. It can also affect other joints, but the most common joint to be affected is the big toe. And today's video could potentially get quite complex, but what I'm going to do is try and make it as simple as I can. So by the end of the video, hopefully you will understand completely what causes gout, what you can do about gout, and what your options are. Now, if there are any sections that you do not want to watch, if it gets too complex, don't worry. You can just use the timestamps in the description below just to skip to whatever section you want. Now, if you've got gout, you certainly know how painful it is. Things like walking can be incredibly painful, or even just lying in bed with the covers on your toe can cause you excruciating pain. So it's a very painful condition. So what is gout? Well, it's a condition, as I've said, that affects the joints. Typically affects men in their 40s or older, and it's commonly associated with other health conditions as well, such as diabetes and obesity. It can affect women, but it's much less common. It's about 90% men to 10% women. The women that it does affect, they tend to have other health conditions as well, maybe hormonal imbalances. So men are the most commonly affected. It's often characterized by pain, redness, heat, and swelling of the joints. So when you see a gout toe, you usually know pretty quickly because it's very, very red. So how does gout come about? Well, it comes from a buildup of uric acid crystals within the joints. So uric acid is going through your body, going through the blood, and then too much of that in the blood leads to kind of oversaturation of the blood, which means that some of it's going to have to come out, which means that when that comes out, it gets formed into crystals, and they're kind of needle-like crystals, so they're very, very kind of sharp. And this is what gets deposited into your joints, and that's what causes you pain. Now, I've mentioned uric acid, so let's discuss what uric acid is. Well, if you've got gout, you probably think of uric acid as a waste product, and it's something that you want to try and get rid of out of your body as quick as you can. But actually, uric acid is the most abundant extracellular antioxidant within the body. And I say extracellular because if it's within the cells, it can act as a pro-oxidant, which means it can do damage to the cells. But outside of the cells, it's actually very good. It helps to neutralize oxidation. It helps to counter the damaging effects of other substances around the body. Now, a lot of the information that I'm telling you today, I've learned from someone who I would consider my mentor, and that's Dr. Brian Walsh. So I have to give him some credit for a lot of the information that I actually know. So as I just said, uric acid is actually an antioxidant within the body. So it's actually a good thing. But the problem comes when we have too much and the body can't process it. So let's now discuss where uric acid comes from. Well, it's naturally made within the body. Typically, you can get it from diet. So if you've got gout, you're probably aware of the things that you should be avoiding. Uric acid comes from the breakdown of something called purines, which are basically compounds typically found mostly in meat, but you can also find them in vegetables as well. So you'd have been told to cut out red meats, things like organ meats like liver, shellfish, or certain fish. I'm just going to put up a list just here so you can see a more extensive list of what foods typically contain purines. So it comes from diet. About 30% of the purines in your body comes from diet. The rest of it is actually made within the body. The most common place that uric acid is made is within the liver and the intestines. Now, uric acid comes from the breakdown of purines. So I've just said that purines come from foods, but also your DNA is made up of purines. Now, there's 4 compounds in DNA, but 2 of them are purines. Of those 2 compounds, you've got adenine and guanine. Now, you don't need to know this, but you've got DNA, which breaks down into purines, so adenine and guanine, plus a couple of other things as well. That adenine and guanine is then metabolized, broken down into hypoxanthine and xanthine. That then gets converted into uric acid. That then gets pushed out of the cells into the blood for excretion. So again, how does gout come about? Now, gout probably comes about because of an oversaturation of uric acid within your blood. Now, some people will have really high uric acid, but will never develop gout. And some people will have just a normal amount of uric acid or slightly high, and the simplest thing will trigger their gout attacks. I can't actually answer why this would happen. Possibly, and this is my thinking, it possibly comes from some kind of other processes going on within the body, like inflammation. So maybe your body has a decreased ability to deal with inflammation. So any inflammatory processes going on within your body may just tip your body over the edge, causing it to deposit uric acid crystals into your joints and therefore causing you a gout attack. But there's certainly an association between inflammation and diabetes and other inflammatory conditions and gout. So there's got to be something to do with inflammation causing gout attacks. Now there's two types of gout. There's primary gout and secondary gout. Primary gout is what 90% of people are suffering with. So there's three reasons why you can get primary gout. The first is that there's an increased synthesis of uric acid. So your body is producing too much uric acid, and this is what affects most gout patients. The second is a decreased excretion of uric acid, and this typically affects about 30% of patients. And then the last one is that it could be a combination of both. So it could be that your body is producing too much and unable to excrete enough. So there's too much coming in and not enough coming out, leading to an increase in uric acid within your blood. Now, we're going to talk mainly about primary gout, but secondary gout can come as a result of other things like certain medications leading to gout, or like a genetic predisposition to it. Let's talk about the synthesis of gout for a second. So too much coming in, too much being made. So where can we get these purines? Where can we get this uric acid from? So as I mentioned, uric acid comes from purines. So where do purines come from? Well, it comes from diet. So we can be eating too much purines. So you probably are aware of this already. You're probably not eating that much. You've probably cut out your red meats. You've cut out certain vegetables and nuts. Hopefully cut down on the alcohol. So you reduced where the purines are coming from. But you can also get purines from your body. So perhaps your body is making too many purines, which is unlikely because your body is quite good at self-regulating. So it's unlikely that your body is making too much DNA, for example. But what could be happening is that your body could be breaking it down too much. So if you've got cells and there's a lot of damage, your body will break down the cells. That will lead to an increase in purines coming out of the cells, so from the breakdown of the DNA, and that could lead to an increase in uric acid. It could also come from liver dysfunction. So if you've got a fatty liver or a liver that's just being broken down for whatever reason, that liver destruction can lead to the increase in purines because of the cells being broken down. But more commonly, actually, gout triggers can come from people who are doing dieting, particularly people who are doing ketosis. So we'll cover both of these right now. So with dieting, what happens is you're in a calorie deficit. Now that calorie deficit inevitably means that you're going to break down certain tissues. You're going to be in a catabolic state. So your body's breaking down your tissues in order to provide the nutrients it needs. Now with that breakdown comes an increase in purines. So the breakdown from the muscle tissues, from the cells, leads to the increase in purines. Now it can also come from ketosis. Now ketosis, again, is when you're on a super low carbohydrate diet. So what happens is your body switches from burning carbohydrates or sugars for fuel and switches into burning ketones for fuel. Now in this state, often there's a calorie deficit. So again, we're breaking down tissues, so that can lead to an increase in purines, but also ketones actually interfere with your kidney's function of getting rid of the uric acid. So you've got two things that are competing for one way out. So normally what you want is your uric acid to come out through your kidneys and out through your urine. But actually, if you've got high levels of ketones within your body, then they're probably going to compete, leading to favorability of ketones being excreted rather than your uric acid. So that would lead to a buildup of uric acid within your blood. Not only that, but ketosis or ketones can create a more acidic urine. Now in the kidneys, in order for you to excrete uric acid, it prefers an alkali environment. So it prefers an alkali urine. So when the urine is alkali, it quite readily passes out the uric acid. But when your urine turns more acidic, actually it causes the kidneys to reabsorb that uric acid back into the body. So ketosis can put your urine more acidic, which can then cause a reabsorption of the uric acid. Now, if you have some kind of hemolytic anemia, so the breakdown of blood cells, again, breakdown of cells leads to the increase of purines because of the breakdown of the DNA. That can lead to an increase in uric acid. So if you have kind of a hemolytic anemia, maybe that could be triggering your gout. And the last thing is fructose. So fructose is a sugar naturally found in fruits. So if you're drinking a lot of fruit juice, that can increase the uric acid. And what happens potentially is the fructose, again, is competing with the excretion of uric acid. And what can happen is the fructose can stimulate the increase and synthesis of purines. So the fructose is causing your body to make more purines. So again, leading to an increase in uric acid. Now, what about the excretion of uric acid? Now, I've mentioned a couple already in the previous section, but the most obvious one could be a dysfunction of your kidneys. So if your kidneys are suboptimal or they're not working for whatever reason, that could lead to less uric acid being passed out. As I've already mentioned, fructose can decrease the excretion of uric acid. Ketones can interfere with the excretion of uric acid, so they compete with uric acid, and the acidic nature of the ketones can cause your kidneys to reabsorb more uric acid. And then of course there's other causes of acidity within your urine. So things like blood sugar dysregulation, like in diabetes, for example. Now, when I'm talking about acidity in the urine, what I'm not talking about is the acidity of your blood. Quite often you will hear people talking about certain diets or certain drinks, certain supplements changing the pH of your body, changing the pH of your blood. And actually that's probably not true. Your body very finely regulates the pH. So the acidity of your blood. It's very dangerous to go out of a certain range within your blood. So your body regulates that very well. But in terms of urine, that can fluctuate quite a lot. So we can affect the acidity of the urine, but not necessarily the acidity of your blood. So when I'm talking about acidity, that's what I'm talking about, not the blood. So when it comes to the treatment of gout, I'm sure you are very well aware of the treatments available. The first thing is you've probably been told to avoid purine-rich foods. And I'm sure you're probably already doing that. Meats, certain vegetables, alcohol. But the problem is, even with the avoidance of these purine-rich foods, you can still get gout attacks. So there must be something else going on. And as I've already explained just previously, you can see that there's plenty of factors that can affect the uric acid within your blood. So obviously we've got diet as one mechanism to change your purine levels within your body, or uric acid within the body. And then what we often find is that people with gout are on various different medications. So first of all, you can try NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. For example, ibuprofen or whatever it might be in your country. Then you've also got something called colchicine. Colchicine is very commonly given to people who are undergoing a gout attack. And what happens is colchicine helps to reduce the inflammation around the joints. So it doesn't actually affect the uric acid, it just helps to reduce the inflammation. So the NSAIDs and the colchicine help with the inflammation. Then you've got allopurinol. So allopurinol works on reducing the synthesis of uric acid. So do you remember earlier I said we've got purines and they go to hypoxanthine and xanthine, and that then is converted into uric acid. Well, there's an enzyme that converts the hypoxanthine to xanthine and xanthine to uric acid. It's the same enzyme. Allopurinol, it works to block that enzyme. So by blocking that enzyme, it's basically stopping the formation of uric acid and therefore reducing the amount of uric acid within your blood. And there's another medication called febuxostat. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but that's a relatively lesser used drug. I think it's more of a newer drug actually, and I think it works the same in the same way as allopurinol, but I'm not too sure about that one, so don't quote me on that one. So that tends to be the standard treatment of gout, but we can go further than that. So the first thing is you've got to listen to your body. Now, many of my patients tell me that they can actually feel when a gout attack is coming. And over time, if you've had gout for long enough, you know what your triggers are. So we've gone through the common triggers already, but a lot of my other patients tell me that stress is a big cause of a gout attack. So stress, particularly if you're not eating well, so those two combined can often trigger a gout attack. And I reckon that's probably to do with stress causing more inflammation within the body. And that inflammation just reduces your body's ability to handle the uric acid. So it's more likely to cause that trigger. Exercise is also another really big trigger for a lot of people. Now we're told, or you're told, that if you have gout, you should be exercising because the chances are you might be overweight, you might have diabetes or other health conditions. So exercise is a good way to reduce your body weight, improve your sugars, improve your health. But in quite a lot of people, exercise can actually trigger gout, and that could be mechanical reasons. So for example, maybe if you're walking, that repetitive movement through the big toe, if it's the big toe that's affected, that can cause perhaps your body to suddenly deposit more uric acid crystals. Or it could be the inflammation or the oxidation from exercise, so the damage that your exercise creates. So if you're doing intense exercise, potentially that could trigger a gout attack because of the inflammation. Some of my patients also tell me that being out in the sun or being in the heat can trigger a gout attack. Now I'm not sure why this could be, potentially again because of heat causing inflammation, or perhaps the oxidative effects of the UV rays that could cause more damage within the cells and therefore more inflammation and therefore trigger an attack. Who knows? Spicy foods is also another reason people can often get gout attacks. Now this could be because of the spices, so it could be because of the chili, for example, or it could be that the spicy foods people are talking about tend to be more processed. So over in the UK, Indian food is very popular, Indian takeaway is very popular. So perhaps people are going for Indian takeaway, and the way it's cooked is probably lower quality ingredients or oils that are very poor quality, so they've become more inflammatory. So that potentially could be the reason why. So it might not be the fact that it's the spices itself, but it might just be the way it's cooked. Also, foods that are rich, very heavy in cream or particularly heavy with alcohol. So if you use a red wine for a sauce, then there's obviously going to be a more increase in purines. Sometimes you don't know that you're eating foods high in purines. So just be aware of what else you're eating as well. And then poorly fitting shoes could cause a mechanical trigger for your gout. So those are very common triggers that a lot of my patients see. So now we're going to just discuss, what else you can do to help avoid or even improve your gout situation. So the first thing you can do obviously is to improve your diet. So if you're eating a lot of foods high in sugar or processed foods, then try and convert that to more natural unprocessed foods, high in vegetables, not really necessarily high in fruits because that's got a lot of fructose, but high in vegetables of all different colors. And then make sure you're hydrated as well. Now, if you're dehydrated, imagine you've got a solution, and in that solution you've got uric acid. If you reduce the amount of water, so you reduce the amount of fluid, the uric acid in that fluid is going to stay the same amount, but actually the concentration is going to become more because there's less water to dilute it. So if you're dehydrated, maybe there's more uric acid relative to the amount of fluid within your blood. So by increasing your hydration, you can increase the dilution of uric acid. So that could probably help you as well. Not only that, but by increasing hydration, you're obviously going to urinate more. So potentially you're going to pass more urine and therefore take with it more uric acid. Now, when it comes to the natural solutions, what I want to just say before we go any further is natural solutions are not necessarily an alternative to any medications you're on. So if you're on any medications at the moment, don't think that by taking a natural alternative, that it's going to be a replacement for medications. So if you are going to go down the route that we're about to discuss, then speak with your doctor and work with your doctor. So in terms of natural, I'm going to say solutions. I don't want you to think that these are cures, okay? These are just things that will help your body to reduce the uric acid or reduce the production of uric acid within your body. So black cherries or tart cherry juice is a very well-known sort of remedy to gout. I'm not sure exactly why or what mechanisms it plays. Possibly it has something to do with antioxidant. So if there's any inflammation, maybe this helps to reduce the inflammation within your body, therefore helping to improve your body's ability to handle the uric acid load. So that's one possibility. Then we also have celery. Now you can either do celery as celery sticks, so increasing the amount of celery that you eat per day. And from what I understand, you're probably looking at about 3 to 4 stalks of celery a day. Or you can take celery as a supplement, so like a concentrated celery seed extract. Now, from what I understand, celery works in a very similar way to allopurinol. So do you remember earlier when I said that allopurinol inhibits the enzyme that converts hyperxanthine to xanthine and xanthine to uric acid? So celery seed extract or celery will also have a very similar effect to allopurinol. Now, I'm not sure what concentrations you need for the celery seed extract, and I don't know whether that's comparable to allopurinol, but if you're taking celery seed extract and you're gradually building it up to a recommended dose, perhaps that can have a very similar effect. I don't know. So let me know in the comments if you use celery seed extract and whether that has helped you reduce your gout attacks or reduce your gout or uric acid within your body. Then the next thing is, remember earlier I was saying about how acidic environment in the kidneys, so acidic urine, can cause more reabsorption of the uric acid. Well, if you take magnesium or potassium, that can change the acidity within the urine. So I often recommend magnesium glycinate. I think that's one of the best forms of magnesium. So taking magnesium glycinate or potassium supplement like potassium citrate, for example, that can also help to reduce some of the acidity within your urine. Some people recommend calcium, but personally I don't like using calcium so much because that tends to lead to other issues like cramps in people. Or if you've got heart problems, then you don't want to add more calcium because that can cause more heart issues as well. So calcium, I would not recommend, but potassium and magnesium. Now, when it comes to magnesium, what you can also try is Epsom salt baths. Epsom salts are basically magnesium sulfate. So if you were to dissolve, let's say you've got gout in your foot, you could dissolve a whole load of Epsom salt into a foot bath and then soak your foot in your foot bath. Or you can make the Epsom salt into a paste. So add a tiny bit of water, make it into a paste and rub that onto your joints. Or potentially you could use magnesium oil as well. Now, in terms of topical application of magnesium, so foot baths or pastes, I'm not sure how effective that would be, but every little helps. So you can always just try it. If it seems to help, then keep doing it. So those are the natural solutions that I've come across that seem to be effective in many ways. So you've got hydration, changes to diet, celery seed extract or celery sticks, tart cherries, and then you've got magnesium Epsom salt paste or Epsom salt bath, magnesium supplements, so magnesium glycinate or potassium citrate. All of those could potentially be quite useful. So what I want you guys to do, if you have gout, have a look into all of these. If you're not sure about any of these, a good place to start is examine.com. That's a really good place to search for certain supplements to find out the effects or the effectiveness of supplements. And once you've given all of that a try, let me know. Let me know what works for you. What have you found triggers your gout? What have you found helps with your gout? So let me know in the comments section below. I hope today was helpful. A lot of this information, as I've already said, I've learned from a guy called Dr. Brian Walsh. So check him out on YouTube as well, Metabolic Fitness Pro. Stay safe, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.